You're good. Good to go.
At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Aloha kaho. This is the Public Land Trust Working Group meeting. Let the record reflect that it is Thursday, March 21st, 2024. And the time is 1:06, I think.
Yes.
We are recording this remote meeting held by Interactive Conference Technology. The members present in today's meeting are Sherry Broder, Don Chang, Louis Salaveria, and myself, Hulu Lindsay. Also joining us is our newest member of the working group, Brickwood Galutaria, OHA trustee at large. He is replacing Mililani Trask on behalf of OHA. Administrative and technical support are provided by Stacy Ferreira, Everett Ota, Amber Kalua, and Kevin Chak. First on our agenda is approval of meeting summaries, which was February 1st and February 21st. Amber, is anyone signed up to speak on this item?
No one is signed up to speak on this item.
Can I get a motion to approve the meeting summaries for February 1 and February 21?
So moved.
I'll second, Chair.
Okay, it's been moved by Sherry and seconded by Louis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Members, any discussion on any of the meeting summaries? If none, we'll move on to item 3, review Act 304, Session Laws, Hawaii 1990. Sections of Act 304 still being relied on, court decisions, and history of payments of pro rata share of airport revenues to OHA. Amber, is anyone signed up to speak on this item?
No, there is not.
Okay, so we'll open it for discussion. You look like you can hardly wait, Sherry.
Okay, well, I brought this up at the last meeting, so I'm just bringing it up again because I'm pleased that trustee Galataria, and so we've had many meetings, and at the last meeting, I referred to the fact that Act 304, which was passed in 1990, this was the deal that was done with Governor Wahe, was good. People worked really hard to reach that deal, went over, all the different factors that would go into it. And it was working fine until, the federal government passed a law saying that state couldn't pay OHA airport revenues. But what's happened over the years, so my point is that the state has continued to use those portions of Act 304 that it likes, even though the act was struck down. So in particular, the state really likes the definitions of sovereign revenue, which OHA just agreed at that time. It was a package deal. Okay, so OHA agreed at that time that it wouldn't make claims for sovereign revenue. So those are things like taxes, that kind of a category of things. There's an enumeration of all the different things that OHA doesn't claim a pro rata share for, but even though it was struck down, the state continues to use that list. So OHA only gets the proprietary revenues. And at the same time, the past settlements that have been made with OHA actually included their airport revenues, but paid through general funds rather than from the airport revenue fund. And even when the federal government passed the Airport Forgiveness Act, the reason it was called forgiveness is because the feds forgave the $20 million that had been paid out of the airport revenue fund to OHA. So when the settlement was made with the state in 1993, okay, to do back payments. Okay, so in 1990, then started getting pro rata share. Then in 1993, there was a settlement for back payments due. Okay, and those were paid for out of the general fund. They didn't go back to the agencies looking for the pro rata share. And then when Kaka'ako settlement came, when they computed how much was owed to OHA, they included the airport revenues and in the computation, and then they didn't go back to the agencies again to collect the money. They gave OHA the lands at Kaka'ako. So, just looking at what the state's understanding was, I think the understanding was, and it's been exhibited in the settlements that have been made with OHA to make back payments. So I think that that's a good solution. I know it's for all the way back in 1990, but in my mind, my evaluation, I think it's withstood the test of time. And I think the state could do the same again that it's done, which is include the airport revenues in its calculation of what is due to OHA, but pay it from equivalent funds, which would be general funds, rather than going back to the agencies and asking the agencies to make up what the airports aren't paying. The most lucrative or the most productive revenue producing activities that the state conducts on the ceded lands are at the airports and at the harbors, right? I mean, like, poor DLNR, they have to deal with charitable organizations and only charge them $450 for a yearly rent because, they're trying to help the community and things like that. So, I don't think that, OHA just can't give up on, its claim for airport revenues because it's just not fair, So, there were disputed things between OHA and the state in 1993. Okay, but what happened was the state didn't, at that time, the law was that the state was supposed to pay interest on funds outstanding to OHA. And so in order to get to the end of it and stop the running on the amounts owed, they had the state and OHA agreed on the $129 million that was paid at that time. But there were still issues remaining, which were patient revenues, pro rata share on that, and housing, low income housing, and interest. So that the state earned on other things. So anyway, so those were set aside. That was the Healy case, and Judge Healy decided in OHA's favor. And then the case went up on appeal to the Hawaii Supreme Court. Healy ruled in favor of OHA on all the disputed matters. So went up on appeal to the Hawaii Supreme Court. And at that time, the court, although they because of the Airport Forgiveness Act, they struck down Act 304, they still looked favorably on the substantive findings of Judge Healy.
Who was chair at the time?
That was Clayton.
Yeah, so I remember Clayton walking around town with a big check.
Yeah,
He's
they
walking
had
to Bishop Street with a huge check, and all of the banks
Yeah.
were converging,
Yeah,
saying, hey,
yeah.
friend,
There's a
Put it here,
picture.
put it here.
put it here. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a picture of the trustees at the time in 1993, and they blew the check up, really big, gigantic.
Yeah.
There's a picture somewhere. I don't know where it is, but there is a picture somewhere. Yeah, but yeah,
I
so,
recall.
okay, so that's my strong, unshakable view of what's fair. And I just feel like, hey, we don't have to work so hard. It's already been done. We don't have to take the money from DLNR, tell them to make up the difference, which is what DLNR used to do, but we should. And the state has historically done the same thing. Now, this might not be the year to come out with a pronouncement on that because there isn't too much extra general fund money, but the future is going to be bright.
It's definitely an interesting synopsis of the situation. I think procedurally, right, with the departments paying
Yeah.
their particular portions, those are technically already factored into those operational budgets already, right?
Yes, right.
Potentially such a move like a separate appropriation in all likelihood would probably require going through the whole legislative process, right? Of
Yeah.
appropriation.
Well, even for Kaka'ako, which was land, not money, we
That had
go
to go
through.
to ledge, yeah.
So those are the two options.
Mhm,
One
mhm.
option is money,
Yeah, yeah.
the other option is land
It's some
And-
kind of value.
of value, right?
Mhm.
Right, of value. So those are the two. Well, I've come up with this new idea and I don't know if it'll work or not. And well, I shouldn't even take credit for it. It's really Stacy's idea. So, but I think that, income producing, an income producing location, such as OHA gets a concession at the airport or two concessions at the airport, someplace that is ceded lands that would allow OHA to make money, so that I think is, that was kind of part of the idea behind Kaka'ako was that OHA,
Yeah.
the reason to take it was OHA was going to make money from it.
There is going to be income. It
would
would
be
be an
income,
income producing
Right,
asset.
of course, that hasn't worked out, but nonetheless, for airport revenues, nice solution might be you are in a practice session. Where's Amber?
No, go
Oh,
ahead, Don.
Dawn wants to talk. Okay, go ahead, Dawn.
You got your speaker on.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Sherry, I could never let a opportunity to comment pass me by. But in my view, I think this is obviously above, at least it's above my authority. I think that could be a recommendation that the working group makes as part of our report to the legislature, that there is this outstanding issue. And I think that that's actually a legislative decision if they want to, if they want to revisit the airport revenue. But I don't know if we have the authority. I just think it should be part of a report that we send back to the ledge as far as, there is an outstanding issue. OHA asserts that that the airport revenue under the Federal Forgiveness Act is still an outstanding issue. And to perhaps make that whole, that's something that the legislature needs to address through these various methods. One could be a separate appropriation. Two could be income producing land to the airport, from the airport to OHA. But in my mind, I think that that's a valid point, but something that the working group can make a recommendation for. But I don't know if there's more than a recommendation that the working group can make.
Well, obviously,
address
the
that.
working group can't enact legislation,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah.
or issue executive orders or anything like that. So
Right.
I don't think there's something that we can do that is self-executing,
Right,
but
right.
I think that would be a possible recommendation. And the other thing is the other Healy provisions that I mentioned earlier, patient revenues and housing. I think I'd have to talk a little bit further with OHA, but I think those are still outstanding issues. So I just bring those up
Yeah.
to kind of give a full flavor of what we might do. But I think there's a third option for payment, which, I think we could say that there are three options and the state has used all three of them. One is, well, the state has used two of them. One is cash, which they did in Act 329 many years ago.
Mhm.
One is land, which they did in 2012 for Act 15,
Yeah.
which is the Kaka'ako settlement. And I'm suggesting today a possible third idea. And it could be a package. It doesn't have to be just cash or just land. So the third option is some valuable location where OHA would have the opportunity to make money itself, such as the concession at the airport.
Yeah, so long as it's probably not on airport land, because I think you'd still have the Federal Forgiveness Act issue,
No,
right?
because there are plenty of concessions. So it wouldn't be a pro rata share, it would just be
Revenue.
a revenue generating. And whatever everybody else pays into the airport revenue fund, OHA would do. So I don't see
And I
why
think,
OHA couldn't be equivalent to duty free shops. You know, whatever
Mm.
duty free shops deal is at the airport, OHA gets one too. Same
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, and you know, that's probably even possible to do now. I mean, I think the airport could make an exemption on 103D exemption to permit
Well,
that.
Well, ah, okay,
Yeah, I mean,
we'll look into that.
yep, yep.
But I think that, you know, it may not be that OHA can compete with duty free shop, you know, might have to be a, you know, like an 8A, you know, under the Small Business Administration, they give you know, they give more points to disadvantaged groups or to
Mhm.
Native Hawaiian groups.
Mhm.
The Native Hawaiians are specifically mentioned under that. So something like that is a way for the state to pay. So that's just,
Yeah.
I haven't, you know, talked to anybody at the airport, and I'm not really totally familiar with how they do their procurement. My understanding is they do the whole thing all at once. In other words, somebody takes all the concessions.
Mhm.
So OHA couldn't possibly compete with duty free shop or whoever is a multinational, multi-international corporation or hedge fund that's going to end up with a concession at the airport.
I'm not sure. That's probably an Ed Sniffen question.
Yeah.
How they
Agree.
issue out their concessions, because
Okay.
I think, quite frankly, I think they concession off. Or, I don't know. I don't want to misspeak on behalf of
Yeah.
OHA,
Mhm.
but I do suspect that there are, I don't know if they just do one concession here. I
Okay.
think that there are different parcels, that they,
I think they bid it
enter
out.
into.
I
Yeah,
think they
so-
bid it out.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think so too. So I think there is a 103D process that they go through.
Yeah.
So, but I think that is that's kind of an Ed Sniffen question to
Okay.
ask about. And all of their airports, you know, there are concessions available at each one of the airports. So that is,
Can't
you know,
help.
I think that that's a valid option, is just to provide you an economic
That
opportunity
will help.
to participate. So that may be something that could happen,
That's right.
you know,
Yeah.
sooner than rather than later. So, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe we'll try to look into that more. And maybe Louis, you could help me
Yes.
find out more details. And we're gonna meet
On-
with Ed, right?
Yeah, I can.
So let us do that first,
Okay.
so we
And
don't waste
inform.
your time in case
We'll meet
he's
with
got
Ed.
all the
Oh, yeah.
answers.
But I think as a, you know, as a discussion point of the working group and
Yeah.
for things that have, I mean, I think we're throwing it out there as a
Yeah.
potential option
Oh, no.
Yeah,
in terms of
Thank you.
addressing the issue.
yeah.
So,
Yes.
Yeah. So, but
And I
we-
suspect that would be more palatable for the legislature, because they don't have to put money in, but it is a way for OHA to be sustainable.
No, I'm not suggesting it but as an overall final solution, but rather one of possible ways to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I mean, I think
and-
land, I'm sorry, just, you know, that's probably very palatable too. So, But, so I just think that, you know, it probably probably the most palatable would be more than one way of doing it, you know, so that it would be, you know, more, yeah. But anyways, okay, that's
Okay.
my,
Thank you.
okay, Chair.
That's the lure to come to the meeting in person, right?
Hi, Ryan. How are you? No, I'm not for me.
Rico, do you know Ryan?
We
Ryan
have a-
Kanakaole from, he used to be with the AG's office, but Don stole him.
Yeah.
he's now the deputy.
He's now a deputy at
Oh, yeah.
DLNR.
Oh, nice to meet you.
And I stole him proudly. Yeah, no doubts about that. Thank you.
Okay, so then, I think Thank you,
All right.
everybody, for
No, not yet,
listening.
not yet.
Okay, let's move on then. Discussion
Response.
regarding next steps after review of responses to PLT WG letter. Did you folks look at your letters in your folders?
Well, of course, because one of them was from me.
Okay.
Well, make
Yeah.
sure I submitted and responded in time.
Amber, do we have anyone that asked
No,
to
we do
be?
not.
No
No
more?
one signed up yet.
Okay. So an accurate and complete inventory of ceded lands and public land trust lands, including submerged lands. And so I did hear that you had a comment on this. So Sherry?
Okay, well, okay, this one I see together, like we sent out all the letters. We didn't really get any responses. Okay, so the statute says that a working group with the cooperation of any department or agency that uses, manages, or receives income proceeds or other funds from the PLT, we're supposed to submit a report, but
Yeah.
the problem is that we really didn't receive any responses and of any substance. And so, I think this all happened back in December, which was why then I thought we needed to get additional funding to hire
Mhm.
professionals to do
Mhm.
this work.
Mhm.
I'm not a CPA or anything like that, or I don't know how all the different state agencies keep track of their receipts, and I don't, maybe Lewis knows, but I don't think the rest of us really know all the different agencies.
Mhm.
So I thought that we should get somebody, we should hire professionals. So I still stand on that. And I was looking at some things from the past where Hawaiian people are complaining that the inventory is inaccurate and complete. I think Dawn has done a brilliant job of defending the PLTIS
Mhm.
and the work of DLNR. And I think that we all appreciate what DLNR does do and how it has tried to be as accurate and complete as it can be. But DLNR is relying on everybody else. And so, while we might have Dawn here to attest to the work of DLNR, we don't know really everybody else. So I think that I'm just thinking, I'm gonna put it on the table because I know we want to get going and not keep leaning like this.
No, you get to,
Yeah, so I think
Some form of
that
recommendation.
we should stick to our position, even though legislature didn't fund it. And I think to be friendly with DLNR, so we can be friends back and forth. How about think about this, what if we support DLNR's efforts to get funding to upgrade its system, and DLNR supports the effort to get from the agencies the accurate information so that in its work, DLNR can get an A+. I don't think we're gonna satisfy Hawaiian people if we can't say that the inventory is accurate and complete, especially the inventory. I think we can't satisfy OHA because of OHA's fiduciary duty to its beneficiaries if we can't say that the pro rata share reporting is accurate and complete. So we did hire CPAs at OHA in 2016,
Mhm.
2015, 16 to do their report. And they did a really good job. I think we've learned from that experience and everything. And we get some professionals, we can, do an even better job. But I think I just don't see how we're
Mhm.
going to satisfy.
Mhm.
And then Stacy told me that she was listening to some podcast or webinar or something. And Jonathan Osorio, who teaches at the Hawaiian Studies School at UH, and who is very charismatic and a great leader and has a big following and was dean of the school. He's complaining that inventory is not accurate and complete. Okay, I'm not saying
Mhm.
that so far we found that it's not accurate and complete. But I don't think I'm able to come, I'm not saying this, I mean, I respect DLNR and I respect Dawn a lot. And I do believe what Dawn said, that, the staff has done the best they can, given what is reported to them.
Mhm.
And so I suggest that we consider, maybe not for this meeting, everybody can think about it, but that as part of the report, we include a recommendation that these professionals be retained, that the state agencies be required to, right now it says with a cooperation with any department.
Mhm.
Well, it may, what's cooperation? Maybe they're gonna say the letters they sent back were cooperation.
Mhm.
And that we be friends and we support each other. And so we support DLNR in its efforts to get the money for the computer upgrade, which I think is for everybody's best interest, not just OHA, but everybody, the
Mhm.
general public, because OHA only gets 20% of the revenues and the general public gets 80%. So I think it's in everybody's best interest to have the best reporting and best accounting possible.
Is that gonna complete the inventory though?
It would, okay, so it would be a two-pronged thing. Hire professionals to identify anything missing and to
Mhm.
say what that needs to be done to make it accurate and complete.
So hiring of the consultants will be paid by who?
The state, because it would be a joint project.
So Louis, where we're gonna get this money?
So I think, so when we started off before session, right, and the opportunity and for the working group to put in a request, through OHA, is something that we batted around in the beginning, and then it kind of ran. There was the two efforts, and the effort that DLNR is doing to upgrade their system too as well, and then also like do an audit of the system, if I remember that correctly. And so
Yeah.
I think it sequentially is like, okay, let's take a look at the system, we'll upgrade the system, and then why would you shouldn't audit it before we upgrade the system, I guess. And so maybe sequentially it works going into the, this year or whatever else can be done, is to provide for some source of funding through the working group to go out and basically take a look at the PLTIS, at least the work that they've been doing, in order to make sure that there's an accurate inventory in PLT, because that's the system that we're using, right? At this
Yeah.
point in time, in the absence of any other system, we
Yeah.
have to rely upon PLTIS. And so the issue is always going to be, do we agree with the information that's in PLTIS?
Well, I think the issue's been going on for decades,
Mhm.
century. So to me, we got a hearing at Hawaiian Affairs, but that was it. On what
Yeah.
we requested this year. From what I read in the paper, I'm not there.
Yeah.
I was there a little bit, but I'm not, Lahaina's just top priority. And so I don't think, I think Chair's question is like, you can't get any money this year, right?
It's
Do you think? we could?
challenging. It's
Yeah.
challenging. I'm
Alright.
not going to say there's, you never know what happens. Stacy, can I
I
just?
hear people whispering through the side doors that
What?
we get plenty of money,
Okay, I hear that too,
you know?
Yeah.
There are,
And what about all
Yeah.
the money that was given to Hawaii Community Foundation? Why aren't they an active, what are they doing? Are they saving their money or for
I
some?
don't know. It doesn't make
For a
sense.
hurricane or on Maui or something?
Yeah.
They got a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of efforts. There's
All right.
definitely a lot of
Okay.
efforts, but in the
All right.
case of,
Yeah.
if something happens like, before the end of session, if there was, something that happened, I mean, a lot can happen before now until sine die, and
Okay,
especially when they go through it. But
okay,
it's just right now, and like I can attest to, is Lahaina is taking up 99%
Yeah.
of the oxygen in the air right now.
Yeah.
And so, but back to the point of, right, when that, and maybe somebody can correct me, when NNK did their
Yeah.
audit back in 2016, right? They looked at the receipts and the information that was being provided by the entities that were submitting to
Yes,
to PLTIS. So it started at the departmental level.
yes,
Versus, I guess, if you're looking at PLTIS and what's in PLTIS, and then going down to the department level in terms of what's being reported back up. I guess I'm just trying to think from an audit trail, where was the information coming from, and how did NNK make its determination on what they considered to be the correct pro rata share that these individual entities should have been
I'll let
supporting?
Everett
I-
answer.
Maybe Everett can answer. I don't know, because that was
Yeah,
before.
well, I do think that at that time it wasn't the PL, they didn't work with the PL.
They didn't work with PLTIS.
Yeah, I just think there's still two issues. One is the revenue reporting.
Mhm.
Okay, the other is the inventory
Yeah.
itself, because a lot in the inventory, watersheds or other things that
Yeah.
submerged lands that aren't making any money or anything, so they're not gonna, you know, Don was saying, but only those submerged lands that get the TMK
Mhm.
are in the inventories. So I think we need to, I don't know,
Let's hear from Everett.
yeah.
Yeah.
Everett,
On
go
how,
ahead.
no, I think she didn't take her hand down.
Oh.
Take
Oh.
your hand down. If you want to talk, put it back up.
Mhm.
You want to
Chair,
talk?
no, I do want to make a comment to, so, and then, so I think Sherry, probably what would be helpful, and I appreciate the support to, DLNR's upgrade of the system. I think perhaps what we might want to consider, everything depends upon the instructions to the contractor, whether it's the PLTIS upgrade or whether it's the NNK, how NNK made the inventory, determined revenue. I'm not even sure if DLNR is going to get the $900,000 that they requested to upgrade the system.
Mhm.
But I think it might be helpful if the working group either made recommendations or were part of the instructions for the upgrade of the system. What is it that you would like? If you see any deficiencies in the way that we're inventorying state-ceded lands, then perhaps it would be best to make some recommendations to DLNR, like what we did when we had Chris. And Sherry, you brought up some of the deficiencies that DLNR also noted in the PLTIS, that it would be helpful if the working group came up with some specific instructions that we would like the next contractor during the upgrade to look at, so that so that when we do the PLTIS upgrade, it can reflect the information you'd like to have in there, whether it's submerged lands and how do we inventory that. So I think, again, it all goes back to the instructions. Likewise, the instructions that we gave to, that you might have given to NNK. But I think the first step is one, because even if DLNR upgraded the system, the PLTIS, I would suspect that OHA is still going to have some questions about, or the Hawaiian community, about the accuracy of the PLTIS system. So I think what would be helpful is step one, having good instructions that reflects OHA's concerns about we're not getting an accurate inventory. That let's give them some instructions. And then two, after the system has been upgraded, because that won't necessarily happen within a year. We will have to go out to procure the contractor. Then we'll have to go out and have them work out with all of the different agencies. So I would suspect that that's probably going to be a potentially 2 to 3 year process, but at least we're all starting with some good instructions, because after that, then we can do an audit of the, if you want to do an audit, a random sampling of the upgraded PLTIS, then determine whether it is accurate. But I mean, we're not looking at an expedited process. And I think if we're not part of if the working group isn't part of the instructions, we will be back here again, 3-4 years down the road. So I think the instructions to the contractor will be very helpful. Again, I think taking a lot of the comments that Sherry raised to Chris to be part of the instructions to the new contractor would be helpful. That's kind of my recommendations to ensure that we are comparing apples and apples and not apples and oranges. And then we're back here, at some future time questioning the accuracy, because I think Sherry's comments were valid. And it is important to reassure the Hawaiian community that OHA was part of the instructions, part of drafting the instructions to the contractor who's going to upgrade the PLTIS system, so that, we are ensuring that whatever the product, that it is something that has been worked out with OHA's input into the upgraded system. That's my mana'o on, on the next step, because again, I think Sherry's comments about the Hawaiian community still questioning the accuracy, and John Osorio, I have a lot of aloha for John Osorio. So even his comments about it not being accurate, it would be helpful to understand what are some of the shortcomings so that our contractor can address those as part of the upgraded system.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Everett, give us your opinion of what N&K
Mhm.
did when they went through the audit in 2016.
Sure. I came on to the PLT council team after that process to work with N&K had began, but
Mhm.
still at an early enough stage that I was the primary person involved with the outreach to the agencies, the kind of overseeing some of the work of N&K,
Mhm.
and then working through to the publication. So I can definitely speak to maybe some of how they got to there.
Yeah.
The N&K report itself was a follow-up from a prior financial review conducted by KMH LLP,
Mhm.
who took a similar approach of reviewing the accuracy and completeness of the Act 178 reporting that is compiled, published by DLNR
Mhm.
per Act 178. So that is, pretty much what it is. It's a review of that annual Act 178 report,
Mhm.
where all agencies are supposed to report on the receipts generated from public land trust lands. So that maybe is one point to kind of note, that it's really the agencies doing that Act 178 reporting, and that's the basis of the analysis of N&K
Mhm.
and KMH previously. Not necessarily PLTIS.
Yeah.
So PLTIS is a separate system and process that, in my experience, the agencies go through. And I don't actually know the last time the agencies were asked to update their PLTIS information or records. But it's a separate reporting process, so they're not necessarily, there's no guarantee really that they're linked in any way, right? That the receipts generated by the agencies are the same ones that are reported and found and populated into PLTIS. So N&K, in doing their financial review, they received a land inventory that OHA prepared for that work. So that land inventory that OHA prepared was based on a variety of sources, including records at PLTIS, but I believe also including some old SLIMS records, which should have been, kind of carried over into PLTIS when that system was set up. But also other sources were reviewed too, like a number of reports were put out by the state auditor saying what parcels were determined to be PLT lands, and this was dating back from earlier work conducted in like the early 90s, maybe even late 80s, to look at things like the harbors, airports, and determine what parcels were not PLT lands. It also, I think, looked at other other sources. It might have been things, even things that came up over the years, like things that were put before DLNR in terms of submittals. But that was all compiled into a land inventory, but all sourced, and then presented to NNK, and then they took that inventory and compared it against the parcels that were being reported from the various agencies, and they did the work to see what are the kind of the sorry, I'm not an accountant, but the back end books about
They tried to reconcile it. It
Exactly.
appears the two.
Exactly. So they actually looked at the underlying receipt records,
Mhm.
what was generated by what parcels, and then they cross-referenced it against the list that OHA prepared
Mhm.
or presented. Were all of the parcels covered?
Yeah.
Were the ones, were the ones that were missed? Did they have receipts associated with those parcels? And if so, they flagged those as being missing, or there are gaps, reporting gaps
Mhm.
that were associated with each of the agencies. So that was kind of the big effort, right? So there was work certainly by OHA, and we've frankly lost some of that capacity to do that same kind of intensive preparation work. And then of course there was also the work by NNK and their whole team to go out to the various agencies and interact with them, collect their working papers, and then do all of that reconciliation report that was consolidated.
And I think there was a ton of work. I mean, if you go over
Yeah.
the NNK review, it was always something, at least, when I reviewed it, a lot of the information that NNK was looking at was the information that was being reported out by the individual agencies that were submitting their revenue generated. But I guess going back to the original question about the PLTIS and the software upgrade and all of those things, it's like, we need to know the asset
Yeah,
and have clear kind of like understanding and agreement around the assets that we're looking at.
yes,
And that kind of seems like the first stage. And then second stage, the revenue generated from those assets. Because if
Yeah.
there's still questions around, well, are we inventorying all of the assets correctly? Then you're always going to have this kind of like, well, then are we accurately capturing all of the revenue that's supposed to be for each one? So, I mean, if there's a degree of agreement that if PLTIS is going to be the system of record, right? And then what can we do to make that the most accurate system of record that we could all agree upon?
Mhm.
okay, well, I guess I get back to my concern, which is it's kind of like, I didn't work on the PLTIS. I'm
Yeah.
not a DLNR. I don't know how it operates. And I think to have it done right, it needs someone this is their expertise. I'm not even an accountant.
Yeah,
So, for the job of identifying what needs to be improved and where and what,
Mhm.
I think it needs to be a professional, and it should be a third-party professional, so that
Yeah.
that people aren't saying, oh, DLNR is just sweeping it under the
Yeah,
rug,
yeah.
or OHA's sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah.
So I get back to, I think we need, and as Ever was saying, just to do the revenue. I
Yeah.
think the inventory is a bigger job than
Yeah,
identifying the revenue. To do that is very intensive
Yeah.
work, but it needs to be people who know
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Oh,
We don't
yeah.
want people who, we get some,
Mhm.
we just don't want
Yeah.
to go through the whole process of doing it
Yeah.
and have people that don't, aren't,
Oh, yeah.
excellent quality
Yeah.
in doing that.
Yeah.
So that's why I guess I keep coming back to, we need
a third party person to come in.
yeah,
Mhm.
who can take a look at everything. I'm not there at DLNR. I don't get, Don's graciously provided some employees to answer some questions, but
Mhm.
5 or 10 minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't really do a deep dive
Yeah.
in a short time. And anyways, computers not my specialty either. So Just talking.
Yeah, and I think even Chair, I mean, even as we go
Yeah.
through the proposed upgrade,
Yeah,
and Chair, let me know if I'm making assumptions or talking out of term. I mean, even having OHA be a part of, what we're looking at in terms of what we're upgrading with the system
yeah,
to gain more confidence in PLTIS so that it can become the system of record that we can all agree upon. That would be a huge step forward, it almost seems like. Because it wouldn't just be DLNR system, it would be OHA system too as well.
I have a question. So on the land inventory that was prepared by OHA, and I'm just gonna call it PLTIS Records Plus. So on the plus, were those lands identified not found in PLTIS at all?
I would say yes.
Okay.
But I guess I can't speak to a specific example of that. I could probably go back to the inventories, that were, again, from that time period back to FY16. But yes, I mean, the idea is that they weren't presented. And if I could maybe go into something else that I wanted to speak on. I think if we're talking about what PLTIS might look like in terms of an upgrade, to make it a system of record, I think it's really changing it to kind of lock down the system and prevent the kinds of, the way that the records are updated, at least when I last interacted with PLTIS. And that was that the agencies are basically allowed to load data onto the system and basically wipe whatever was previously there. It's just, it's, as I understand it, PLTIS is more of a GIS system, right? That's made to present the information completely. Yeah. But it's based on whatever the agency submits, and it's basically uploaded as like a database or a CSV type file, and then whatever was there previously, it gets replaced by, right? So there's no kind of check on what is being replaced. I mean, either through purposeful changes or just users, right? The information that's loaded onto the system can completely vary year to year unless you're doing a side-by-side comparison as to the parcels and receipts that were presented year to year. There's no way to kind of confirm that this inventory is anything more than what whoever uploaded was willing to put into the system. So it's really like locking it down, tracking kind of the revisions to what parcels amounts being reported. But I also recognize, even if you move toward that system, it's also the additional record keeping impact burden on the agencies to have to, also transmit, and keep track of what needs to be included or not into PLTIS versus just doing a batch upload once a year or whatever the request comes in. But so that's why I guess I'm sure I can say that there were additional things put onto the system. That were added to the PLTIS, in the plus as you kind of frame it. I just but that's because there's not really a check to say what should have been kept on there.
And to your point, if the upgrade is going to allow for that, because if it is a GIS system, it's not really an asset management system. It's just primarily like a mapping system, right? And so, maybe we're asking the system to do more than what it is technically capable of, but at the end of the day, it's the inventory, it's the identification of the parcels, and then we can identify the revenue that's generated from those parcels. We're all in agreement that these are the parcels that would qualify for the pro rata share. I see.
Chair, if I may, I think some of the challenge is the PLTIS is not, as I understand it, it's not necessarily designed to be the basis of inventory, of revenue.
Yeah.
So, I think there's different purposes. However, if we're looking at the PLTIS to be the source of how do we determine, is it an accurate inventory? I think a lot of this just depends upon the instructions that you give.
Yeah.
DLNR is not going to do the upgrade ourselves. We will hire a third-party consultant who has expertise to do that. But again, if this working group is suggesting that there be some additional information given to the contractor as far as instructions, so that we are ensuring that we're capturing information that may not be currently included in our PLTIS, I think that's something that we should be considering before we hire the contractor, because it may either change the cost of the contract, but because again, my feeling is we're going to have the same issues that you're raising now. If you are relying upon the PLTIS to determine the accuracy of the inventory, then I think we should start at this point in looking at what the shortcomings are and how do we ensure that this PLTIS accurately reflects an inventory that can form the basis for the revenue, because it may not currently do that. But as opposed to doing a whole separate system to determine inventory, which I suspect is going to be extremely costly and time consuming. But so, I mean, I think that's something for this group to consider. Again, my recommendation is that as we prepare the instructions to the contractor, OHA be part of that discussion to look at that and what would be some additional information you'd like them to consider.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it seems like there's, an underlying problem that DLNR has no control over, which is, I think, what you pointed out in prior meetings, which is the agencies are using different systems, are using different definitions. There's no standardization.
It's a self-reporting process.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not sure how we deal with that, but I think that's a problem to be.
But I don't think that's the problem with the inventory. That's a problem with revenue.
Yeah.
How each agency is
Okay.
reporting revenue, that's the issue. The inventory is the same. I mean, I think most agencies use the PLTIS to determine what's the status of land. Is it currently encumbered? Is there a lease on it? But again, the PLTIS serves a different purpose than the determination of revenue. That is really the 178, and it is self-reporting. We ask all agencies to report what's the revenue that they generate from state ceded lands. That is different. We're not asking them to generate, tell us the revenue of what lands you have under the PLTIS. So I think there's two separate issues. If you're looking at, are we having the accuracy, is the inventory accurate? Is the PLTIS inventory accurate? Then let's look at the upgraded PLTIS system that DLNR is working on. If you want to use that as the basis to determine the accuracy of the inventory, then you should participate in some instructions that we give the contractor. If there's still going to be disagreement over DLNR's PLTIS, then I think the working group needs to establish a whole separate system, because if you're going to use that as a basis for the inventory, the revenue is a separate issue. I think that is how we report that, how each agency, and that's also instructions to each agency on definitions, on what is it, how you determine, is it sovereign, is it proprietary, reading the UH's inventory, their response is very different. I mean, it's UH says they're fulfilling their public trust, so they're not reporting any inventory except for what's outside of what, what they're, so again, I think it's the definitions and
Ganon, yeah.
instructions are critical
Making
to ensure
billions of dollars.
consistency.
Well, the agencies are doing the exact same thing in both PLTIS and the revenues, which is everything is self-reporting. DLNR does not do any independent checking of the information that is provided to them. They are providing a
Yeah.
service to everyone, which is to put together an inventory and collect the data. But they're not doing anything on their own to ensure the accuracy of any of the data that they get.
Yeah.
You're right, but
Enforcement.
I think what they're not, what maybe, and I'll have to check with DLNR, is DLNR generally, it's what we, self-reporting for the PLTIS is, we expect if it's county and you've got there's a parcel of land, you provide, we are relying upon agencies to provide updated information on who's the lessee,
Mhm.
what, are there any encumbrances, do you have an easement? But they're not changing the boundaries of the ceded lands. It's either ceded or it's not. It's, there's a reporting on, is it 5A, 5F, but the agency self-reporting is what is the current status of the land?
Mm.
If there's a change, what are we getting? Are there any additional encumbrances? So I don't think it goes to the heart of whether it's ceded or non-ceded. I mean, I think the state would agree that probably 95% of all lands are ceded lands. And that's probably accurately reflected on the PLTIS. We rely upon the agencies to update the PLTIS on the current status, leases, easements. But
Well,
the inventory is different. The
Okay.
revenue is different. The revenue, that's totally
You know,
self-reported.
I'm having a major deja vu moment here. I mean,
Yeah.
if you guys are talking about this in 2024,
yeah,
I recall this question sitting in my office at the Senate, and Colin was working for me at that time.
yeah,
Wes Machito was sitting in front of me.
Mm.
yeah.
And I said, Wes, okay, ceded land inventory, accurate? So I don't know about that. I said, okay. Revenues, honor system?
Mhm.
He said, yes.
Mhm.
I said, so there is no formula, consistent formula across the table for every agency to follow to report? He
Mhm.
said, no. I said, problem, big problem.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so we're sitting here 10 years later with the same questions.
Mhm.
That's an amazing thing to exhibit. I
That's
mean,
why I keep-
it's kind of humorous, but it's definitely
not.
tragic. You know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
So
really-
that's why I keep pounding it. I keep at it because everything is self-reporting.
How do we
It
change
may
that?
be
How do we
that
change that?
What?
How do we change that?
Well, maybe we could ask DLNR to provide us the instructions that they give the agencies for their submissions to PLTIS and the instructions they give
Yeah.
for the revenue reporting.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, one of my questions was that vending machine on UH,
yeah,
do we get a portion of the candy bar?
I think that one we do. Is that right, Everett? That we do.
We
That
do.
we know that.
Okay, we know that.
And the reason we know that though is because our financial review, OHA's financial review, asked that question
Yeah,
and
'cause
got the answer.
I recall
That's how
UH
come-
used to hold back a lot.
They still do.
They still do?
Mhm.
They still do.
Yeah.
I mean, even
Okay.
Don just
Yeah.
pointed out that
Oh,
they
Water
don't,
use.
they're not very good in their
oh.
reporting.
Sorry for rehashing this stuff, but
So I have, oh,
No,
go ahead,
because that's,
go ahead.
yeah.
I wanted to ask Chair Chang a question. We're talking about potential improvements to the current system. I'd like to know who is the owner of the historical tracking of transfers of ceded lands? Whose kuleana is that? So I know PLTIS is point in time of what is, but who, because I think there's even a larger issue of transfers of ceded lands between state to state, federal to state, state to county, you know, and that's where I think there's even a bigger gaping hole is who has that historical tracking of parcels? Because again, if the current system is erasing the previous information, you know, I'm not sure if the PLTIS future state should be the owner, DLNR be the owner, I don't know who, but there has to be a tracking of the original parcel and how it has either remained or transferred over time. And
Yes.
who owns that?
Yeah, so Stacy, I think DLNR tracks the all state land.
Mhm.
Counties probably track their own land, private parties track their own land. You probably could do a title search, or you could go to the Bureau of Conveyances. You pull out a TMK, you can pick out all of the transactions on a particular TMK. But I
Yeah.
don't know whether the PLTIS erases everything. I have to check what DLNR, how that how PLTIS deals with new
The
information.
history of each
Well,
parcel is.
Don, you know, if
Yeah.
the governor
Well,
EOs a
I think it goes
parcel
back to
out of
this, it does
DLNR to
PLTIS track, right? And
Department
is
of
as a-
Ag, how do
as-
we, how
Does it
does,
maintain the historical
how do
record,
we
or like, does
know
it come back in
that
and does it
then
overwrite
when
what
the
it was
Department
previously
of
inside
Ag
there? So to
reports
your point,
it to
does that record
DLNR
of
for the
conveyance over
PLTIS
time still
system,
exist? I
that
don't
they've
know.
kept
I don't
the
know.
ceded
And how do
Bureau
lands
of Conveyances
designation?
has all that.
I mean,
They cannot change the designation. It is seated. I think you have to, that's something that you cross-check with Department of Ag. You take that TMK, you check with that TMK. Now that it's been transferred out of DLNR to DOA, is DOA reporting that
So you
revenue?
do that checking.
No, we
that
don't do
kind of
any
check.
checking.
Who does the check that you just?
DOA would
described?
do that. I
All
mean,
right, so
the
it's all
title report.
self-reported back again.
it goes back
Right,
to.
it is
Self-reporting.
self-reported.
So DLNR has no way of knowing for sure.
We don't, once it leaves DLNR, we don't track how that gets reported.
So I'd like to, I mean, I don't know, again, I don't know if it's an improvement to the current system or if it's a recommendation to this working group, but somebody has to own the
Yeah.
historical record keeping or tracking of ceded lands over time, regardless of the governing agency. Because to your point, garbage in is going to be garbage out,
Mhm.
right? And so we may be losing ceded lands, records of those transfers if somebody is not the specified owner. Can that be a recommendation that someone in the state an agency is required to be the keeper of all of that information, regardless of the governing agency?
Is that not the Bureau of Conveyance?
Well, they're not
Oh,
gonna, they're just gonna take everything.
You
Like
have
if
to
you,
do parcel by parcel, TMK
Right.
by TMK.
and like if you
Yeah.
go in, you can register your parcel, right? So it can be, Bureau of Conveyances is private and government
Government.
lands. Yeah.
Essentially, you're suggesting a recording system separate for just seed land specifically.
Yeah, because I think
absolutely.
that's actually the inventory, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
where the origin of, when the feds gave the lands to the state of Hawaii, that's the origin. And then where has it gone since? Because there's been lots of transfers, right? Even between, DLNR and DOA just recently, right? With Act 90 and, feds to state, state to county. And, there's all of this going on. And if nobody's bird dogging or, watch dogging it, pretty soon we don't even know if TMKs are still in the ceded lands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
Because the governor is transferring here
well,
and there and
that's the
everywhere.
point. So I'm just wondering, like, can this be a recommendation that somebody has to own this work? That historical tracking from the beginning all the way till, future state.
Well, I have to say that when we went to the Department of the Interior, we specifically asked them, where is the document that was attached to the 1959 transfer back to the state of Hawaii to steward the ceded lands? And they couldn't answer.
Mhm.
They couldn't answer because they gave the state of Hawaii the lands to steward
Mhm.
for the Native Hawaiians and the general public. But nobody could answer that question in the Interior. We went to 3 meetings and
Yeah.
all 3 couldn't answer that.
But I think, again, if we don't have somebody that's their kuleana, just that dispersion of information it's going to continue this confusion.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting question too is if the governor EO'd to the county, then is the count, what happened to the pro rata share?
That's
So
what
they
I'm
like-
saying.
Yeah,
It's, there's no trail.
yeah, okay.
So while we were speaking, I pulled the PLTIS. I'm
Yeah.
the administrator for OHA. We have a number of parcels listed there. I changed a PLT status for one of our parcels. I just, Change it from Public Land 88-233 to undetermined. But there's no, right, I mean, it's
You just
No
uploaded
version.
it.
There's no version.
exactly,
There's no,
right, so there's no tracking of what parcels were and,
And now,
and now.
yeah,
That's
um,
dangerous.
And
Wow.
that's where I think it's,
Yeah.
I think that's the
falling
issue
through the
that,
cracks.
is where maybe the if we're talking about overall upgrades to the system, right, that version control. I think an important component if it's gonna be, seen as this accurate system.
So that's troublesome, but
It's very-
Ryan, maybe the answer. Why does the University of Hawaii has the ability to say nay or yay to what they transfer to OHA, the 20%? Because they're kind of making excuses that they don't have to transfer the 20% because of stuff they do for our Hawaiian kids. Our Hawaiian kids are still paying their tuitions, but I don't know the full story. I want to hear it.
I'm not sure about the story about that. How they exclude those. I only know as far as, and we've already discussed this, the self-interpretation or by department interpretation of the instructions under formerly Act 304, but actually Act 170. And the EOs that were issued do that. Because once the EO gets issued 2204 to the departments, it's really, as you say, an honor system in terms of interpretation. There's no body right now that ensures that the criteria are uniformly applied.
Yeah, there's no system, right? There's no formula.
Mhm.
So how do we change the may to shall
Legislatively.
legislatively? Yeah? Mhm.
But in many ways, I think the whole purpose of the working group is to make a recommendation to the
Mhm.
legislature in order to.
We'll see what's lacking now and make that recommendation.
yeah. I mean, I mean, John, do you think that there's a chance you're gonna get the $900,000 for the upgrade?
Lewis is in a much better position to answer that than I am.
I don't know if I to be honest, right now it's really up in the air. It
Yeah.
really is.
So, I mean, it seemed like, correct me if I misinterpreted what you said, but it seemed like you were saying, well, the session might be going along and the horse left the barn for most things, but don't give up yet. Maybe we
no,
can still
'cause-
get some money.
Well, I mean, I'm sure Brickwood can, like, a lot of things happen towards
Yeah.
conference, man.
Yeah.
You never know what happens, and Stacy
Well, should we-
knows, and in conference. So I wouldn't give up, but
Yeah,
it's not because of a revenue issue, and
Yeah.
I'll make it. It is the attention that there's too much attention being focused to one particular topic
Yeah.
right now.
right.
That's kind of what's
It's
happening.
not political.
Huh?
It's not political.
It is.
Everything's political.
Yeah, everything's political.
Everything's political.
But the one issue, which is
The Lahaina
Lahaina
problems,
issue,
yeah.
is
Yeah.
it's just it's just taking up everybody's attention.
Well, then we of course didn't get any answers from the agencies. So, we need,
Mine was okay though. Well, I
Oh,
don't
you're
have
supposed to
anything to.
And is DLNR the right holder of the information? Should,
I think by statute, DLNR is the holder of the
Currently.
disposition of land, right?
Yeah.
The disposition of land.
I
in
mean,
the
they
state.
hold most of the lands anyways, even though some lands have been transferred out to HFTC or something like that. But, okay, I think that's a question we should put on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss. Is DLNR the right agency? You know, I also would, I mean, I think you're asking us to participate in the instructions, but I think we need to know what the instructions are at the present time before we can participate in the
Yeah.
instructions.
And we don't know that until we get the contract. I mean, until we get money to hire.
Yeah.
All right, but can we get copies of the whatever instructions DLNR sends to the agencies regarding reporting, either
We
or?
just, I think what we do is we just tell them to, in compliance with Act 178. We don't give any specific instructions
All right.
other than to say Act 178.
Yeah.
Is that act, is that concise enough to get or again, is it too vague? Do we have to revisit the act and tighten it up?
I think as long as you don't have the control of an entity that would
Mhm.
somehow
Yeah.
oversee the uniform compliance to any act that you provide, it's gonna go back to honor system
On the system?
Yeah.
within the departments, and
Yeah.
then you're gonna get to the issue of non-uniform.
Of course, the governor could issue an EO,
Yeah.
could be by legislation, but in the past, the revenue reporting was done by
Yeah.
EO, then it became part of the statute,
But that's,
but
that's
originally,
pursuant to the act. you
yeah,
know, That's
Yeah.
why the EOs are done.
pursuant to the act, yeah.
Yeah.
But Chair, for if the monies are appropriated for the PLTIS system improvements, wouldn't the process be going off of proposals?
It's in
And
the,
so
it's in the
are we
governor's budget, but
just
it's going
talking
to,
about in terms of instructions to the contractor, would be
the House included,
bring
it, but
to
the Senate
the-
is doing the
this
budget,
group
is reviewing the budget.
the
on
scope
that.
of work for the proposal itself?
Once the
Yeah,
Senate-
I mean, that, it could be that. I'm not sure how DLNR or IT, actually, it would be, I think, IT that would put together
that would be
that
good.
RFP. I mean, I don't think we want them to
In the
reinvent the
budget,
wheel.
not a separate-
Yeah.
it's in
I
the
think
budget.
it is, building upon the existing one, but I'm not sure at what point in time the instructions would be at the RFP stage or at the actual, once the contract. So it probably would be the RFP stage. So again, I think the next steps would be one, let's see what happens at the end of session, whether we get the upgrade, the funds to upgrade the system. And then we can maybe bring that back to the working group as far as, and maybe at that time we bring in our IT people about what would be the procurement process and how could we include in their specific criteria should be included in that RFP.
Stacy, what happened to our bill? Our working group bill, asking for the money?
Web didn't hear it.
Oh, I didn't.
Wham
Okay.
didn't even hear it.
Who?
Wham.
Oh.
Yeah, so, I mean, to ask for $900,000, don't you have to have like a justification, a written justification or something? Can we get
Yeah,
a?
we
copy
did, and
of
that was the one
whatever
that
it is?
we shared with you guys. It was really just to upgrade the system, to
Yeah.
make it more, to include upgraded technology. It was a
Yeah.
very general,
Yeah, it wasn't very,
No,
mean,
there wasn't a lot of
I
details.
couldn't really tell what it was you were trying to do or what you.
Upgrade the system because it's
That's
been
it,
over
yeah.
10 years. It's been over
That's
10
it, but
years.
that's all I could garner from that, so I didn't know, I just thought to get $1 million, basically, you had to.
No, and that's probably not even gonna, that won't cover everything. But I think we don't get into the details until after we get the funds, the appropriations.
And then you work within the box of the appropriation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Language in the.
So what do you mean, like what, I mean, would the budget just have a line item
If
saying?
it were
Yeah.
general enough, then, for
Yeah.
example, you could there's more flexibility in the type of
Yeah.
contract that you can.
Yeah.
That you can issue.
I think that the request was for upgrades to the PLTIS system.
Yeah,
And, when it did go through the process of budget review and budget
Yeah.
development, I think there was a recognition that one,
Yeah.
the working group happening. So it's an appropriate time to
Yeah.
actually make some investments into PLTIS in
Yeah.
order to support that effort. So that's how it went. I think that the details of which I think Chair is inviting OHA to be a part of, like, okay, let's talk about what types of upgrades do we want to make to the system, actually.
well, did you give us a copy of the instructions that were given to the contractor who did do the PLTIS system? I think that would be helpful.
I think we gave you whatever we could. Some things were proprietary that we could not share, but I think we shared with you whatever we could.
But are we gonna get into that situation again where we don't know if you're gonna be giving the instructions that we wanted to give, or you've modified the instructions that we proposed to you? Is that gonna be?
Totally speculative. I won't know until we get the funds. I mean, maybe they might give us a lot less. I don't know. But I mean, I think it would be fair enough to say, I, like Brickwood, don't want to be sitting at this table 5 years from now or 3 years from now, asking the same set of having the same uncertainties about the accuracy, that it would be helpful that the right people sitting at this table. Now, again, I want everybody to remember, PLTIS wasn't necessarily designed to determine the accuracy of the revenue, but it really is a different purpose. So, but I think it is worthwhile for us to be part of the foundation for this upgraded system so that we can consider OHA's concerns. And it would be really helpful, the more specific you can be with what are the problems, that would be very helpful in crafting or tailoring better instructions. So other than just, I think that would be helpful. If you had, or if John Osorio had specific questions or specific examples about what's not right, whether it's at 50%, what's 50%, maybe that's something we can look at, or whether it's submerged lands. But the more specific you can provide us of examples of where there might be inaccuracy. And I appreciate Ed Everett's, his exercise going on to PLTIS right now and being able to change something. There really's got to be there's got to be greater accountability. We can't have people just coming on to the system, changing all kinds of things. So I don't know what the protocol is for that. But I think, and I will say, I think DLNR is the right agency to be the keeper of at least documents related to state lands. Beyond that, we have no control over what other people do. But I think we are just trying our best. But we're just, we're sort of caught in a conundrum too. How do we, we've got these other issues involving OHA and the accuracy. So again, the more specificity you can provide us, the more tailored we can make the RFP.
So what do you think our next meeting discussion should be very specifically? So we can agendize it and get something done.
For this particular issue, for the PLTIS, like what we want to see out of PLTIS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion and quite a few meetings, but I don't think we've gotten to first base. So we need to figure out a way that we can move on and have recommendations written so that we can have something to start a report. I don't think it's going to be this legislative session, but it should be before the end of the year.
And if I may, Chair, it might be,
next legislative session,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I'm
I
sorry.
mean, we may want to look at option A and option B. Option A is if we get the $900,000, how do we collectively look at a instructions in the RFP that addresses some of the gaps that the community of OHA has identified in the upgraded system. Option B may be, if we don't get the money, can we pull of resources to perhaps do an audit of the PLTIS system to determine its accuracy? Because I think at some point in time, we have to fish or cut bait. We either gotta we're gonna get an upgraded system to get a better inventory, or we're gonna have to deal with what we've got. If we don't get any money, this is the best system that we got to rely upon. So if it is the system we have to rely upon, then what are the steps to ensure that it's accurate?
Yeah.
Then we move on to the next step being the inventory, the revenue. What are the specific instructions we want to give to all of the departments to ensure that everybody is that their inventory of the revenues or their determination of revenues is based upon a same set of definitions and instructions. But I think we need to have two options. Option A, if we get an upgraded system, what do we do? And option B, if we don't get funds, then what do we do with what we've got? Because we won't be able to come back. I mean, DLNR, we won't have any monies to upgrade the system. We'll come back next year to try to get funds, but you're right, Chair. We've spent a year and we're not any closer to answering some of the questions. We've flushed out a lot of stuff, but I think we need to either decide one way or the other, fish or cut bait with what we've got, or try to upgrade the system. That's just my thoughts.
Sherry.
Well, I also think that we should consider using Act 304 as our guidance for the revenue issue, and follow up on our discussions earlier today on 3 possible ways of making full funding to OHA, which is either cash and or land and or preference for concessions at the airport or other substantial revenue generating places.
Sherry, are you familiar with that act?
Act 304?
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
So you're familiar with how vague it is? Is it vague or is it very specific to revenue?
It's more specific than Act 178 for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
Oh,
fact,
okay.
if it wasn't for the non-severability clause in Act 304, that Act 304 would have been still the guidance today, and
Yeah.
and the certain departments still use Act 304 as the guidance
Mm.
because it is more specific.
Mhm.
And I gotta agree with Sherry on this, that Act 304 should be, it's the basis because it was the product of like years and years of negotiations.
right.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of went away.
Is it
And
subject to,
everybody agreed on it,
is it subject to interpretation by each department?
not by each department.
No, but
But, okay, I mean, there was a dispute on patient, whether or not it included patient revenues, whether or not it included low-income housing, whether or not it included patient revenues, low-income housing, duty-free shops, and interest.
what,
Okay, and that was decided by Judge Healy, went up on appeal. He ruled in OHA's favor on all 4 issues
uh-huh,
and went up on appeal. Then after the Airport so-called Forgiveness Act, the Ohio Supreme Court found that it violated federal law. And so they struck it down because OHA was getting 20% of airport revenues, and federal law makes
Yeah.
airport revenues only for the airports.
yeah, I recall.
So, but the court, was deferred or found that Judge Healy was right, that OHA was entitled to revenues from duty-free shops, and had some other language in there. So they didn't vacate the decision, but they vacated the statute. They didn't vacate Judge Healy. So I think that the issues are all before us, and that Judge Healy's decision decided the final thing. But of course, there's still lawyers around. It's not going to be like, if you make bread, you're supposed to put in 1 cup of flour, right?
Does
But there's
the,
always going to be,
does the
always
law
gonna be-
require more specificity?
no, I think we should, go ahead.
So actually, Act 304 was the specific legislative response to that call for more specificity.
Yes.
So
Okay.
the Hawaii Supreme Court in the Yamasaki decision said that there was no judicially manageable standards which to pull on. When it was saying, when OHA came to them saying, we need, our 20%, and then the courts basically said, we don't have any standards in which to apply to this dispute to say what 20% of what.
Yeah.
So Act 304 was the legislative response to that. So it set out, again, this sovereign proprietary distinction, listed a number of things that were specifically subject to or excluded from OHA's pro rata share. So I think that's where, it is in the most comprehensive kind of line of what is and isn't subject to OHA's pro rata share. I think that's why,
Yeah.
agencies have relied on it over the years, even after the subsequent Supreme Court.
What is back pre-Yamasaki?
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
So could you look at your calendars when would be the next time that we can meet? And I'm looking at the second week of April 8th to 12. Some place in there.
Might be a little tough, Chair, because that's conference.
Oh,
It's conference.
Oh, conference committees.
Yeah.
Oh, fun time, huh?
You remember.
Oh, yeah. The knives all come out.
Just hope they're not pointed at me.
They will be.
There's recess days on Monday, the 8th and the 10th.
what is that?
And the week that you're looking at.
Yes.
April 8th, the week of April 8th, there's 2 recess days, but not that they're like, there's still work being done.
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah,
Those
it's
days.
Yeah.
just recess in chambers.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
can
that's
still
right.
they can still have conference. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Well, what do you suggest then, Melissa?
Oh, you know what?
Based on your schedule.
Schedule it. I may not be able to partake in pie, but I will try to call in. How's that sound, Chair? I mean, I don't want. I mean, it goes for both. Myself
Yeah.
and Chair and Ryan as well too. So
Yeah,
Well, would the
we're
week,
all at everybody's beck and call at that time.
would the
but
week before be better?
probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
But that's not-
But that's not
That's
good.
not that-
That's
that's-
Merrimack weekend.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So people are here and there and everywhere. The Hawaiians are
Yeah.
anyway.
All right, yeah. What about weekend, Saturday morning? No, all right, forget it.
No.
That was too ugly of this.
So why don't we move to the week of 22nd to 26th, away from
22nd of
April?
April.
Yeah.
Hmm,
Shall I just pick a day?
Monday the 22nd looks good.
How's that for you, Don? Monday, the 22nd?
Monday, April 22nd.
I'm getting ready for a surgery, so I've got a
Oh.
whole bunch of pre-ops around that week.
Oh.
So, Ryan's, so I've got some appointments on Monday and Tuesday. You just said it and I will try to be there.
Yeah.
You just said.
Yeah, Chair. If you want to go like the week of April 15th,
15th.
if you want to do the week of April 15th, that's fine. I mean, I think.
That's a
You
bad
could-
week for us.
Oh, that's the bad week for
Yeah.
you. Oh, okay.
So, and I was thinking of pushing it further out in April. Maybe you'll be more open,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, Chair, do you want to wait until after the legislative session?
When
we
does
know
it
what-
end?
The first week of
yeah,
May.
May.
May 3rd.
I could.
Yeah,
Well, should we, or should we try to
Clear.
meet again?
Huh?
May.
What do you think, Stacy?
Yeah, May 3rd is 99.
What are you asking?
I'm just wondering, do we need to provide any information to the legislature, or we're not really ready anyways? Okay, so
We don't
Should
even
let-
have one sentence of the report.
all right, okay,
If we
So-
can
but
go
I
into
think
the
it's more
next
because
session
we'll
with
know
a
whether we
solid
get
package.
funds or not.
all right.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's always been
Yeah.
That's better
the
idea.
goal.
Start from the
Yeah.
beginning
Yeah.
and
All
just
right.
work it.
Okay,
Yeah.
We've been
let-
talking a lot, but
Let's
there's
do
consensus
May.
on something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe, how about May 7th?
May 7th it is.
That's a Tuesday.
Thank you, Chair. That works for me too, May 7th. So
Okay.
Stacy or Ryan, when is legislature, when is Sendai? May
Three-
May
May
3,
3, okay,
Friday.
okay. Okay,
Friday, May 3rd.
okay, May 7th. You want to do May 7th?
You can cry on my shoulder then.
That's fine.
We may be looking for a job.
No.
May 7th afternoon? The afternoon of May 7th?
I kind of like a morning
Yeah, morning is
You
good.
like
because my
morning?
brain
My
kind
brain
of goes
is
sleep after lunch.
Okay.
Coffee wears out.
We need another cup, Ryan.
Okay,
Let's do it.
Can we do it before 10 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay.
what do you want to do? 8 to 10? 10? 8:30 to 10:30?
Okay.
8:30
Whatever.
to 10:30.
Okay, that
Well,
sounds
I'll
good
leave
with
it.
me.
10.
Okay.
Oh,
Maybe
you want, we
10:30.
can do it earlier. if You want?
8 to 10 is fine with me. I'm an early riser.
Okay.
With the
Chair
early
Lindsay?
bird, yeah.
Even Brickwood is early.
Chair Lindsay,
Yeah, no problem.
oh,
Does that sound okay? 8 to
Chair
10?
Lindsay,
Members.
Yes, Amber?
it appears that May 7th, you and the rest of the trustees will be on Molokai.
Wait,
Oh,
May 8th?
yeah.
They will also be on Molokai.
Oh, they'll be on. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Okay.
Thursday the 9th appears to be open.
May 9th?
Yeah.
If it's okay with May 9th, the Thursday?
Same
Chair,
thing?
we have a Kalapapa transition meeting and there's Mauna Kea board.
Oh,
Woo-hoo.
How about Monday, May 6th?
Monday, May 6th?
But not in the AM unless chair is inclined to move administrators meeting. Oh,
What, yeah,
Chair, you're on mute.
You're mute.
We have an administrative meeting on Monday, the 6th. Maybe I'll give the administrators a day off.
Okay.
Oh, we'll reschedule. If Monday, May 6th is the best for everybody,
works for me.
Ryan and we can
Yep.
attend.
Okay.
So
So
8,
Monday-
you're looking at 8?
The 6th,
The 6,
Yeah.
6 from 8
But
to
it
10?
started,
Yeah.
8 to 10.
from
Okay.
8 to 10.
All right, very good. I'll save that.
Works for me.
Okay. We're in Molokai on the 7th.
Go, yeah, it's a board meeting up there.
Chair, for the record, are you deferring item 5 on the agenda? Discussion regarding requests to the counties and federal government for information relating to the inventory and identification of ceded lands and public land trust lands, including submerged lands under their jurisdiction and accounting of the
Yeah.
income. and
We're
proceeds.
deferring it because I think it has a lot to do
Mhm.
with whether we're gonna get money or not,
Okay.
what we're gonna do next.
yeah.
Okay, I'll make a notation. Thank you.
And Sherry, will you tell Amber
Yes,
what our agenda is gonna be
yes,
like?
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll send you a copy too,
Yeah.
so you can have a chance. to look. Do you want-
Are there any other questions?
Okay. Okay,
Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to
Adjourn?
adjourn.
So, second.
It's been moved by all the state people to adjourn.
I can make my 3. No.
Thank you,
Thank you
Don.
again, Sharon.
Thank you,
And thank you-
Louis.
Thank you for
Frank.
feeding me all the time.
Thank you for letting